After what seems like eons, we finally have another PS5 exclusive, Ratchet & Clank Ripped Apart. Now, taking into consideration the possibility that Horizon Forbidden West may not, I repeat, may not come out this year, according to PlayStation Studios boss, and God of War never stood a chance of launching in 2021, Rift Apart is the second miracle from Sony. I say miracle because it's made by Insomniac Games that made another extremely good title for the PS5. And if we pause to ponder upon such matters, one could say that Insomniac is the only first-party studio that made not just one exclusive game, but two in less than a year. As a frame of reference, it took Naughty Dog 7 months after the PS5 was released to finally come out with a 60 FPS patch for The Last of Us Part 2. Anywho, let's see if Ratchet & Clank is worth your time or not, because as I've put it before, every other reviewer and their mothers are putting money above time, where here we value time above everything else. And you'll always find discounts on games and they keep getting cheaper or even freer. But at the end of the day, you won't find time at a discount anywhere. Much like every other game in existence, Rift Apart adheres to certain design rules. Here, the pillars that sustain the weight of the game are, although not in the specific order, the cinematics, followed by some exploration. Afterwards, we're fighting our way through a level, then the platforming kicks in to calm us down after the combat, and lastly, there are some hacking/puzzle elements that basically have the same role as the last pillar, only to start the action up again. These gameplay pillars are well segmented throughout the entire game in my opinion, and to me, it didn't feel like any of them overstayed their welcome or vice versa. Now let's dig into each and every one in detail. The cutscenes are so graphically advanced that we don't even need outside rendering anymore, like in the days of yore where Blizzard was top dog when it came to pre-rendered cutscenes. In this department, I have absolutely nothing to object to this level of graphical fidelity, especially when the cinematography is so well done. I mean, the camera shots, the filming angles, or the framing are of a Hollywood-grade quality, and they manage to capture the essence of every scene. You're well aware of the quote-unquote Pixar quality cliches everyone attributes to the graphics, so I'm just not gonna repeat that.
It has been fun, Ratchet.
Next up, exploration, which is short because we're not talking Witcher 3 level of maps here. This being said though, I found the world building to be spectacular. For example, this scene reminded me of the Robots animated movie. Because every type of robot has its own personality, this entire scene is teeming with life, albeit an artificial one. But nonetheless, they were interacting with your character and through him, with you. And these small details that people could often miss don't happen just randomly. These are plotted moments, and it's tiny things like these that set aside Sony first-party exclusives from other games that wouldn't put that much effort into such moments. Another great example would be this club. I wasn't expecting to find such a lively habitat, with robots having well-defined personalities that interact just so naturally in the environment. It struck me because it felt so real. It even reminded me of the Star Wars bar scene and how well that was directed. Not to mention this sweet nod or homage to the Star Wars transitions that you mostly find in 1. George Lucas movies or 2 at weddings. Still on exploration, I have to confess something. In almost every non-linear third-person action adventure, like Control for instance, I get lost a lot like the imbecile I am. I always need a compass or at least a track highlighting button like in Dead Space to tell me exactly where to go. So, in Rift Apart, when I pressed R3 and saw this icon on the screen telling me where to go, I was like, hallelujah, thank you Jesus! Finally, a game for idiots like me. And even though this might not be such a big deal to everyone, trust me, it is to me. To sum up this whole exploration pillar thingamajig, the world or worlds from Rift Apart are amazingly created, and how you navigate through everything is really intuitive. The combat is up next, and it's one of the strongest mechanics from the game. It's really well balanced and it never lingers or is too short. It has that je ne sais quoi that keeps you engaged in the action. But more than that, the weapon design itself and the synergy between the weapons make up this fantastic experience that you feel during every enemy encounter. And speaking about enemy encounters, Rift Apart really reminded me of another little shooter. So much so that I would utter the blasphemy that the combat from this game has more in common with Doom, or Doom Eternal, than with every other shooter out there. Let me explain. Doom's combat is composed of a series of arenas where you're always on the move while you calculate at 300 miles per hour what weapons you should use and in what situation, how to combine them, who represents the most imminent lethal threat, who doesn't represent the most imminent lethal threat, while you use certain acrobatic elements to move constantly around the map, because when you stop moving, just like the great white shark, you die. And Rift Apart's combat is, well, composed of a series of arenas where you're always on the move while you calculate at 300 miles per hour what weapons you should use in what situation, how to combine them, who represents the most imminent lethal threat, who doesn't represent the most imminent lethal threat, while you use certain acrobatic elements to move constantly around the map, because when you stop moving, just like the great white shark, you die. Moving on, the weapons. Oh, the weapons. They sort of have a life on their own, to be honest. A lot of planning and gameplay philosophy went into making them. For example, they're not the same ones from the 2016 game, although I would have loved for some to make their return. But I suppose that would have sent out the wrong message, like Insomniac losing their imagination or something and rehashing old mechanics. The whole arsenal idea is that it offers you the freedom you need to use combinations however you see fit. Personally, I was using a crowd control build with the Sprinkler, the Glove of Doom, the Electricity Weapon, and another plain one for when I ran out of ammo with the first three. Oh, and the best part is that they all have upgradable levels, and the more you use them, the more you unlock talents, skills, and so on. It's pretty nice because it proves that the upgrades aren't made just for the sake of being there. All in all, the combat is really well made from my point of view, it's fun as hell, and it's as robust as the platforming. And wouldn't you know it, the platforming is up next, and it's as refined as ever in a Ratchet and Clank game. The platforming legacy shines bright like a diamond, and I have nothing but praise for how well it's implemented. And I don't want to spoil too much with this footage here, but this level is beyond anything else from the game when it comes to platforming. I just couldn't believe the amount of fun I was having, and the off factor was through the roof while I was playing it. As a side note, if you're into third-person action-adventure platformers, I highly recommend Crash Bandicoot 4 because it's more than good, it's exquisite. Now we're down to the last pillar, and that is made up of the Lemmings-style puzzle sequences or the drone hacking sections. And if you could tell by my voice, unfortunately for me, they didn't really scratch the itch, so to speak. They were tedious and felt more like a chore rather than something fun. And let's not forget to mention ye old fantasy numerology with the 3s and the 7s. Like when you play with Clank, for instance, you have 3 sections to complete, but in order to do that, you must get 7 ghost lemmings to the gate. Great, I've never seen that before. As a player, you're obligated to go through these sections because they're part of the main design of the level progression. Don't get me wrong, I perfectly understand these tropes, and I'm not saying to remove them completely. All I'm trying to say is that they could have been more imaginative, more engaging, and so on. But seeing that one could argue that this is a game targeted at children, maybe it's not a bug, it's a feature sort of thing. Okay, so I've covered the cinematics, the exploration, the combat, the puzzle. Well, that's basically it for the gameplay pillars. Now onto the... Story-wise, I won't linger on because I really don't have a lot to say in this department. The narrative within Rift Apart is easy to follow, nothing complex is at foot. You will find the typical story for these kinds of games. You have the main heroes, their sidekicks, the incarnation of evil that wants to destroy the galaxy or something or other. In the end, they fight it off and good trumps evil. Yay. As I've said, Simple, predictable, something we've all seen time and time again. But that's okay, because at the end of the day, it's a light adventure game that's meant to make you feel warm and fuzzy inside, not to overload you with depression and darkness. That being said, because it's so generic, it doesn't mean it's badly written. Au contraire, mon cher. The characters feel alive, they're charming, and the excellent voice acting and directing gives everything a lifelike feeling to it all. The dialogue is well written, nothing too cliché that would make you throw up in your mouth a bit. The characters have well drawn out typologies, the sad moments are sad, the happy moments are happy, and overall, everything the writers wanted to achieve, they more than did so. In short, I have absolutely nothing to complain about here because narrative-wise, the story is well woven and also a delight to watch it unfold. Honestly, the game is such on a positive note that it's basically an antidote to Demon's Souls or Returnal. Okay, graphics time, because the visuals are the second most impressive thing about this game. What's the first one, you might ask? We'll get there when we'll get there. In the meantime, I would like to state for the record that I played Rift Apart in RT performance mode, meaning ray tracing was on and the resolution was basically displaying anywhere between 1080p and 1440p. Take all that, bump it to 4K with upscaling, and you get something.
C'est magnifique!
There's also a performance mode that doesn't have ray tracing and runs at 60 FPS. But there is a significant resolution bump to 1800p, after which upscaling is applied, of course. And the last graphical option is quality, which does have ray tracing on and doesn't go under 1800p, but it only runs at 30 FPS. After all is said and done, I'll take the 60 FPS with ray tracing in full HD rather than 4K with 30 FPS any time of day. Because I've had my fill of 30 FPS games from the previous generation consoles. So that would be it for the technical part. Now let's change the mood to something more poetic. Like in the intro cinematic, for instance, where Rift Apart flexes all of its muscles from the start when it comes to production quality. Although nothing too surprising here because we are talking about a Sony first-party studio at the end of the day. And just look at the fur on Ratchet, it looks phenomenal. Honestly, everything looks pristine. From the clarity of the textures to the poly count of the geometry, the eye candy colors, the exterior lighting, the interior lighting, the ray traced reflections, I have absolutely nothing to add to what everyone else already said about this. The artistic design is rather charming as well, one would say. I mean, just have a look. I don't even need to describe what's on the screen, so I'll progressively turn up the music until my voice slowly fades away into the background. Okay, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart is an extremely well-polished masterpiece, and I cannot help but ponder on how a PS5-only God of War or Uncharted will look like. That comes up in my mind especially when I'm looking at these scenes that are jam-packed with intense graphical elements like visual effects, lighting, shadows, reflections, and so on. And all of this gorgeousness proves time and time again that the developers at Insomniac,
Wait for it.
have been bought for way too cheap by Sony. $229 million for a company that made not just one but two major PS5 games? That's a steal, and Sony was hella gangsta when they drew up those papers. I mean, Microsoft paid $7.5 billion for Bethesda, and I know it's not comparable, it's not even close to being the same thing, but still. The next candidate on the list is audio. When it comes to the soundtrack, other than that it reminds me of John Williams from Star Wars, meaning that it's gorgeous, I really have nothing more to add. However, remember way back when I said the visuals are the second most impressive thing about this game. What's the first one, you might ask? We'll get there when we'll get there. Well, we just got there. And maybe for some, the sound is not that important to linger on because it's always there and you can't put your finger on it to analyze it. Furthermore, what can be so enthralling and innovative about sound, right? Well, every little movement you see on screen is accompanied by an extremely high-fidelity sound, like Rivet's mechanical arm or fingers, or the footsteps on different types of surfaces, explosions. Pretty much every single thing is masterfully executed. Now, I wasn't expecting any less from the team that recorded Spidey's lines in different situations, meaning Peter or Miles would say something out of breath and at a higher volume when web swinging, or more calmly and gentle when they're just standing. Anyway, Rift Apart being on PS5 only, I had the chance to experiment something unique to the platform: the 3D sound. The Tempest Engine audio chip can only be found on the PlayStation 5, but it works with any headphones you can plug into the controller. I more than recommend experimenting with 3D sound in any PlayStation 5 game, because in this case, for example, I found the sound to be more alive, with more volume, and being better positioned inside the scene. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, right? Three-dimensionality within sound. The 3D audio is so advanced in Rift Apart that in some instances you don't even realize that you're missing sounds when the 3D option is off. After it's on, you then realize this is how video games are supposed to sound like. In short, as on screen, so in your ears. I think that's the best description I can offer with the entire 3D sound thingamajig. Or I wonder if I can do better. Let us observe Exhibit A and its medium-sized breasts. Beautiful, well-rounded, well-defined, nothing wrong with them, except maybe some daddy issues. But let's face it, daddy issues are the best kind of issues, aren't they, old chap? Anyway, that's how I would describe non-3D sound, as a pair of fine medium-sized breasts. However, if we move our gaze towards Exhibit B's bigger sisters with daddy issues, we can observe a more ample offer. A more generous one that would make you rethink how you were ever fine with just having normal sound in your life when you could have had the ample one all along. Well, would you look at that, I did manage to explain it better. Related to the sound? Sort of. We encounter another PS5 innovation, the controller. As you may well know by now, the DualSense is capable of a lot. But as I've said before, like in this video for instance, until you feel the damn thing in your hands, I can try and explain it to you until Ragnarok cometh and you still won't understand. Because there's nothing to understand intellectually, it's about sensation. And no, sadly, I cannot relay that sensation by using boobs. But what I can do is this for 3 more seconds. Yeah, I know it's been more than 3 seconds, but do you really care? Okay, so among the things from the screen you feel in your hands are your character's footsteps or every nut and bolt you collect. But if you don't want to go all hardcore, you do have an option, in the options menu obviously, to change that. I for one left everything on. So as to not miss things like the bass from this club, which makes you feel like you're there, especially when using 3D audio. Another great sensation is given by this Bell's pendulum, which makes you feel it in the left or right part of the DualSense. Also, when you ride the snail and turn left, you feel the rumble on the left side, and when you go right, you get the idea. Now, let's see what else. Oh yeah, for me, the most interesting thing from the entire game is when you're low on health and while you're hearing the bass of your heartbeat in your ears, you're also feeling it in your hands simultaneously. To me, this is the best tactile feeling because I don't need to take my eyes from the crosshair to figure out when I'm low on health. It's really 4D-like, and in the future, the devs could use this to eliminate certain elements from the HUD. That would be the gist of the haptic feedback. Now let's move on to the triggers. You already know that the DualSense triggers can exercise a certain amount of resistance against your fingers. The feeling is really cool, unique even when it's used properly. Like in the 30 minutes from Resident Evil 8 when you play as Chris Redfield, for instance. That part felt so amazing that I wished it was the same case in Cold War, for instance, where it kinda disappointed me, to be honest. By the way, you can find my honest trailer homage to Resident Evil 8 right in the upper hand corner. So how do the triggers feel in Rift Apart? Well, pretty awesome, how else? The game has a vajillion weapons, and they each have their own gimmick and whatnot. More than that, some even come with alternate fire modes from the same trigger. Like the shotgun, for instance. You shoot from one barrel when you press it halfway, and when you press it all the way down, you shoot from both barrels. Pretty nifty, to be honest, because it can eliminate the need for L2 and R2 at the same time. Basically, you have 4 triggers instead of 2 any time of day. So yeah, in the innovation department, the DualSense features in Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart are pretty far out, man. Although not as far out as the spring suit thingy from the Astrobot game. That is still top notch, to be honest, and nothing even comes close. In closing, I don't have a lot left to say. 95% of the time I consider this game to be excellent. The minor things that bothered me are unworthy of more than a quick mention. And besides the annoying hacking and lemmings parts, there's just one segment that stood out and rubbed me the wrong way. Because as you can observe, I kept trying to jump over this cliff, but I didn't know how to do it exactly. Jump before the edge? After? Right on it? So I kept dying and trying. And I don't really blame the game, to be honest, because it might have showed me at some point, but I just might have missed it. FYI, to pass it, you just need to keep holding R1 and you're set. Yeah, it was that complicated. The main story took just under 10 hours to finish, and I didn't do the side quests because I'm not a fan of those. But I think you can squeeze out a couple of more hours from those. Anyway, the final moment has cometh, and we're here to see if Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart is worth your time. The answer? Totally, man. The experience is awesome. The game has a magical personality to everything. It's a straight up classic, one might say. And the production quality makes everything so charming, and after you finish it, you will be left with a nice memory of playing it and a warm, fuzzy feeling inside while doing so. At least that was my experience with it. So yeah, that's it. Thanks for sticking with me till the end, and see you next time. And until next time...
Wait for it!